Breaking Down the Law is sponsored by Battle Born Injury Lawyers.
Well, as we told you at the top of this broadcast, President Donald Trump has filed a lawsuit against the state of Nevada over its mail-in voting plan after the bill was passed by the Nevada legislature along party lines. The Trump administration calling it unconstitutional. But is it? Here to break down the law, Matt Hoffmann with Battle Born Injury Lawyers. Matt, so good to have you here on the program as usual. And we are talking about something that could impact pretty much everyone that goes to vote. So the big question is, what does this bill do?
Okay, so I mean, there's a lot to unpack in this bill. I'll try to hit the highlights and touch on the Trump campaign lawsuit. So first and foremost, I think it's important for everyone to realize you can still vote in person. Everyone will presumptively be mailed a ballot if you are on a registered voter, but that doesn't mean you have to vote by mail. If you don't want to vote by mail, I recommend hanging on to it and bring it with you to early voting or the day of the election voting. And at that point, you turn it over and you can go vote. But that's the big change in the law. We've always had, or at least for a long time, have had mail-in voting, but the voter had to request it. What this does is turns it on its head and presumptively mails them to everybody, a little bit like what we saw with the primary. And so you get the ballot, the list of candidates, you get instructions, and you get an envelope that's prepaid postage to return it. And that's a lot different than what we've done ever in Nevada. And it's got some concerns. I mean, one of the things is that a ballot, the way that it is postmarked, it can't be forwarded. So if the address they have for you is wrong, it's not going to get forwarded to your new address. And I think that's what we saw with the primary, where there was all these ballots that were piled up in apartments and things like that. That could happen again if they haven't updated their rolls. And then the big issue is that the postmarking, and the Trump lawsuit gets into this. So a mail-in ballot either has to be deposited into one of these secure ballot boxes, which will be in the instructions on where to locate them, or it has to be postmarked by the post office on or before the date of the election. And then it has to be received up to 7 days after the election. And that could create some problems. And I mean, not so much on the federal level, but the local level. A lot of these elections are determined by, 100 votes. And it could be a week before we have it all counted. But then there's this catch-all provision. If it's not postmarked, but received within 3 days of the election, it counts. And that is what the Trump campaign is suing for primarily.
So what is a voter to do? What do we need to be concerned about, Matt, at this point? If this is law and if this lawsuit goes through, what happens to all of us? Are we in limbo?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a severable clause, this 3-day. I mean, here's what it is under the Constitution, basically you got to vote on the same day across the country. You can't vote the day after the election. And what they're arguing is that because these are prepaid postage envelopes, they don't actually get they don't get stamped by the post office like a normal stamp. There's no stamp to cancel. So there might not be a postage mark. So somebody could vote the day after the election, and because inner city mail is fast, you could still get it, by the Friday after the election. And because of that, you would have people in Nevada voting after the election takes place. So that provision very well could be severed from the rest of the law. I guess what I would tell people is that voting by mail, statistically, there's a higher chance that your vote's not going to count. That's just true. There was a 2012 study from MIT. They found the 2008 election, over 21% of mail-in ballots didn't count for various reasons. They either didn't get turned in or they had mistakes on them, things like that. But you had a 1 in 5 chance that your vote won't count. So if people have concerns, I would say use the the drop box, the secure drop box, or go vote in person. And there's going to be at least 35, I think the number was, early voting sites in Nevada, in Clark County. And there's going to be over 100 on the day of the election. But yeah, people have a right to be concerned. I don't know if all this fraud and ballot harvesting, where people are turning in ballots for others, is going to be an issue. being that this is being done so short term, you don't have access to nursing homes and things where you saw these problems in like Florida.
Right.
But people need to know that they can still vote in person and should if they're concerned.
Lots to think about, boy, and there's certainly a lot of law behind it. Thank you for bringing in that perspective, a great perspective, as you always do, Matthew. Pleasure to see you once again. Thank you. Enjoy your day. Lots to dive in. And of course, guys, remember, you can always reach out to Matt and see him there at Battle Born Injury Lawyers.